Well, Narendra Modi has been sworn in as the 15th Prime Minister of India in a glittering ceremony at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Even as we await official word on the portfolio allocation, let's start decoding what this Modi cabinet has on its plate as it gets to work. Joining me now, CM Vasudev, a veteran of the Finance Ministry and former Economic Affairs Secretary, Kalpana Jain, Senior Director at Deloitte in India, and Rohit Prasad, Associate Professor of Economics at the Management Development Institute. Thank you very much, all of you. Well, we don't have the formal portfolios, but there has been a lot of speculation around it. But we do know, by now at least, who most of the cabinet ministers are. So my first question to each one of you, let me come to you, Mr. Vasudev, first. From the names at least that you've seen so far, does this cabinet inspire the confidence in you that Modi will be able to walk the talk?
I have two very general points to make in this regard. One, of course, is that everybody knows that one of the bigger problems that the government is going to face is how to bridge the governance deficit. And connected with that, I think in our bureaucratic system, there is also a lot of knowledge deficit, which in its own way contributes to slowness in decision making. So I would have liked to see some more expertise inducted into the cabinet, people with expert knowledge in different sectors who could help in better policy making and faster decision making. So that is one general point, and I think this is a good opportunity to bridge the knowledge deficit also. I am sure the Prime Minister with his own experience will be able to do a lot on the governance deficit part, but this is the one area which I would have liked to see it bridged. The second general point I have is that, in our system of governance, there is the expert advice or the professional advice which is prepared at the secretary's level, and at the minister level he is supposed to give the political perspective, and combining the professional advice and the political perspective, a policy decision is taken out of the system. But now if you're going to have jumbo sort of ministries with one cabinet minister covering 3, 4, 5 sectors under his charge, and ministers of state who will be in charge of different sectors, I think you are probably unwittingly putting the professional advisor, that is the secretary, one notch below the political hierarchy, in the political hierarchy. I think the need was to induct more professional inputs into decision making. This way, I think instead of having probably less of government, probably you will have more of government in the form of more political inputs into decision making. There are going to be 2 layers of political inputs in the decision making level, and the professional advisor in the decision making is being put one notch below. So these are the 2 general points I think I have in the whole structure of the cabinet. As far as allocation of Indian portfolios to individual ministers is concerned, that has still not been sort of announced, but whatever is there in the media at this point of time, I don't see too much of matching of person's abilities, his background, his knowledge with the portfolios that have been assigned. So all in all, I would have liked to see a little more boldness in this formation of cabinet.
Interesting points coming in there. Kalpana, come in on that. Do you agree with the broader thrust of what Mr. Vasudev is making?
Actually, I have a slight point of difference, and I will use the energy sector as an illustration. We've heard some noises around that, but I'm rather keen to see the integration of the energy policy for this country. Over time, since our administrative ministries were set up and our governance structures were set up, there has been a lot of evolution in the technology and in the way the energy sector has interlinkages between what we had considered were silos earlier. So to illustrate my point, for example, coal was considered coal as one source of energy, shall we say. Oil and gas is a completely different ministry. Power is a separate ministry, renewable energy is a separate ministry, and we have one for nuclear energy too, though that's a very small part of our energy portfolio so far. Going forward, given that there have been evolving technologies in terms of coal gasification, in terms of coal bed methane, for example, or coal to liquid, or the unconventional sources of energy, for example, shale gas, which may occur, oil and gas occurring together with each other, for example, we need to evolve our administrative structure in keeping with what our energy mix is going to be like and how the whole sector has globally evolved. And I feel it would make a huge difference to the energy security and the energy, let's say, safety of this country if the different ministries were to talk to each other in a better form. I don't know, perhaps the possibility of a single minister looking after all of these ministries and therefore making sure that the ministries themselves do not come up and be at loggerheads for each other, which we have witnessed in the last few years. So I'm actually hoping, contrary to what Mr. Vasudeva was saying, that there will be an integrated energy policy that we'll see come about, which will keep in mind the long-term energy objectives of this country, the requirements, and have medium and short-term goals defined therein, and to go with it, an administrative setup where there is no conflict, if I can use the word, between these administrative ministries.
Rohit, which view do you take at this point of time? The faces that you've seen, so far out there going up and taking the oath, especially for the cabinet ministers, are not really the new faces. Many of them have been tried and tested even in the NDA regime. There was this whole talk about the fact that there would be super ministries, it will be a leaner, meaner kind of a cabinet. Well, 45 comparatively to over 70 is certainly lean. Do you see some kind of a thread in at least the people he's chosen? I know that we don't know yet who's getting which ministry, at least officially we don't. Everyone's really speculating about it. But what's the preliminary sense that you're getting? Is there a big idea in this cabinet?
Well, Vivek, the one thing I would like to say is that there is one new face in this particular ministry compared to the previous NDA ministry. And you know who I'm talking about, and that makes a big difference. And since you asked me which view I subscribe to, since two different views have been expressed, I guess it's up to me to synthesize those views. And here's my take on it. I do believe that it is important to integrate ministries. If you were to take the example of the ICT sector, let me give another example other than energy. The big task today is to make India broadband enabled. And broadband connectivity is not just about laying optic fiber networks, but also getting the right content in place to the right people at the right time. It means the integration of the education ministry, the rural development ministry, the DOT, the DIT, and therefore I think it's a good idea to integrate ministries. At the same time, I do see Mr. Vasudev's point that this actually results in a sort of dumbing down, if I may use that word, it's a strong word, of the position of the secretary in the individual ministries. But here, if I would point to the Department of Telecommunications, where we have a secretary level member of technology, member of finance, etc., reporting to the secretary of the DOT, perhaps we could think about a super secretary whom the individual ministries' secretaries report to, who can then play the role of the integrator of expert advice. And we must remember, ultimately, if I may make one more point, that the bottleneck in our system is not really expert advice, but political will. And so I'm pretty glad that ministries are going to be integrated.
I want to take on the point that you made, and it's a very important point, that there is this one new person. And the point actually bears out if one goes into the whole Gujarat model, isn't it? It was all about Narendra Modi. Doesn't mean that he didn't have a team, but he really was, in many ways, a one-man army, wasn't he?
Absolutely, Vivek. I think he was, but I also think that I think if we look at this ministry, there are some experienced faces out there. I'm not so happy with the talks that I'm hearing about the likely finance minister, because I don't see Mr. Jaitley having much experience in finance. But there are some experienced faces out there, and I think that it is going to be a PM-led government. But at the same time, the PM is going to find very soon that he's not going to be able to get very far unless he gets people with competence. So I think he's going to adopt a model where competence comes from outside and the political will and the checks and balances that everything is in alignment with the overall government vision comes from the Prime Minister's office. The other important point here is that it's not just about the central government. It's about the state government and the central government coordinating with each other. And so I think it's that coordination that's going to make or break this particular dispensation, and it's be interesting to see what institutional arrangements the Prime Minister comes up with in order to make that work.
Mr. Vasudev, the point that Rohit just made about the fact that this will be a PM-led government, something that we haven't really seen for the last 10 years, haven't we? The point that this might just be Act 1, the list of the cabinet ministers, and there may be a series of other specialists, bureaucrats that he may actually be bringing in over the next few days to help him and guide him in terms of taking his agenda forward.
Sure, I'm sure it will happen, but I certainly take the point on integration and the benefits that come out of it and all that. But at the same time, the experience will tell us that institutional sort of restructuring and tinkering with the existing systems and all may not be a solution to the real problem. Just to give an example, of course, coal sector and power sector, there are strong linkages and they should be better integrated and all that. But the real problem in the coal sector is public sector monopoly. You need to open up the coal sector for private sector mining, and which proposal has been lying for so many years now. Now, I don't know whether the integration or a common minister is going to help in those type of issues. It is really the political will, which I'm sure, as you mentioned, that the new sort of the leader of the party and the Prime Minister, with his background and his experience and his reputation, may be able to do that. But I just sounding a note of caution that too much should not be read into institutional restructuring or integration and having super ministers, and even this idea of a super secretary under a super minister. This type of institutional tinkering does not help, number one. Number two, it delays the whole process of the government getting down to business, because system will take some time to adjust, and 3, 4, 5 months will be lost in the process. So I would have very much liked to see, I think, a little more systematic, streamlined way of restructuring, identifying the problems instead of sort of prejudging the issues, because, as you know, Prime Minister has not been there even for a day as yet. So it looks to me to be a blackboard type of a structure, integrating ministries, this, that, as if that is the real problem. What I'm saying is all that may be good, but the problem lies elsewhere, and whether this type of restructuring of the system is going to help you to solve the problems, I think only time will tell.
Okay, let me go across to each of you now with my second set of questions, and which is, what, according to you all, is among the first few things that you see him do or that he can do? And let's be practical about this, because I'm sure that all of us have a view in terms of what all he should do, but certain things are doable easily. Kalpana, let me come to you. You talked about energy a while ago, and that clearly is one of those areas which is something that he's going to very closely look at, isn't it? His experience in Gujarat, whether it was power and the whole renewable energy space. What, according to you, can he do quickly to get things moving? I mean, he can't get light in everybody's house tomorrow, but what are the few things, according to you, that he can do quickly?
So, Vivek, this was something I was giving some thought to earlier today. And if I were to look at the set of initiatives the Prime Minister will need to make in the energy sector, I would probably count them as low-hanging fruit or initiatives which would give results quicker, which would give him and the rest of us the confidence that there is actual movement happening and there is actual change happening and we are seeing the results. And I would of course look at the longer term measures which any case in our energy portfolio and for our energy security we need to look at. So for example, one of the thoughts that come to my mind, we are significantly looking at importing LNG into the country to augment the gas production, which in itself of course is another issue that needs to be addressed, but perhaps it will have results over a longer period of time. We could possibly look at small LNG regasification possibilities where you have floating LNG terminals which could be moved from point to point along the coast in the country to make sure that we have LNG available at the spots far closer to the points of usage. One of the issues in energy is always that you import it and you have these large infrastructure LNG projects for regasification which have a long gestation period. So some innovative technologies which are now available, possibilities which are now available are, say, possible to look at. The other areas that you would possibly immediately look at is the subsidies that we are getting. I think there has been some mention by the secretaries of the ministry also in terms of how the diesel subsidy and the petrol subsidy will need to be looked into. It is becoming a huge burden. We are basically not seeing as much investment flowing into the sector, which is critical for the long-term need to develop the domestic production of energy sources, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, whether it's use of emerging technologies in terms of gasification or coal bed methane from coal, or it's extracting coal. So I would definitely expect him and hope he would focus on some of these quick wins which would bring over a period of time better results in terms of augmenting the domestic sources of supply. And at the same time, one thing which remains opaque and we would really look forward to get to hear Vivek about is what is our strategy and policy and approach for acquiring sources of energy overseas. We know that China, for example, has been far more successful than us. So we would like to see action on those points as well.
Rohit, do you believe that the first big challenge for him is really going to be how do you attack inflation? That was one of the biggest poll issues, isn't it? Corporate India, on the one hand, says cut interest rates if you want the capex cycle to turn around. All economists, on the other hand, I hope that includes you as well, are of the view that what RBI is doing is the right thing. Do you feel that balancing this out, because clearly fixing supply side is not going to be something he can do very quickly, and yet at the same time, corporate India is going to look towards him to say, can you do something to cut interest rates? How do you see that, if I may say so, battle playing out? Is that going to be the first big thing that he's going to have to get himself into?
Vivek, you put me in a tough position. Inflation, you're right, is absolutely number one on the agenda. It's absolutely number one on the agenda, for sure. But your guess is as good as any economist's guess or my guess as to how he can tackle inflation without hurting growth. The basic inflation that we are facing today is food inflation. And that relates to fruits and higher value food items because of the increasing incomes from cities. And we are not able to increase our supply to match that. There are some automatic stabilizers in the system if our currency becomes stronger, then our imports will become cheaper, including fuel imports, and that may have a cascading effect on inflation in the economy. There is also some room to reduce our subsidies by actually removing certain irrational formulas that we are using, for example, on our diesel subsidy. The Rangarajan Committee report on the diesel subsidy says that the subsidy should be fixed on the basis of a combination of the export and the import price. But we are basically an exporter of refined fuel, and so we don't need to take into account all the costs of transportation, etc., when we actually subsidize our oil marketing companies. That's going to save a lot of several hundred crores, if not thousands, of subsidy, and cutting subsidy is always a good thing for reducing inflation. My basic view actually, Vivek, is that while all of us outside government talk in terms of macro variables like interest rates and things like that and supply side constraints, there is a lot of room within the system which we just don't know about. For example, this formula on diesel price subsidy is something I know about. But if you were to go inside government, we could reduce inflation by making sure that not so much of our food grains rot, by making sure the diesel price subsidy is right, by doing a variety of other things that really relate to the nuts and bolts of the system rather than the view from outside. So that's me just getting away from answering the question.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Vasudev, someone who's been an insider for many, many years. Mr. Vasudev, do you agree when Rohit says that inside the government, if you have the will, if you have the decisiveness, there is enough you can do to actually bring down inflation? The earlier question that I posed to Rohit, if you could answer that part as well, and the point that Rohit's just made.
Yeah, I think the starting point has to be a better coordinated fiscal and monetary policy. A lot can be done by the government to make the fiscal consolidation more credible, whether it is streamlining of subsidies or things of that type, and also to augment the supply side of goods by tinkering with customs duties and things of that type, so that the supply is improved a little bit. And if credible measures for containing the fiscal deficit are taken by the government, coupled with some supply side measures, I am sure it is going to give a lot of confidence to the Reserve Bank of India, which is the custodian of monetary policy, to have a more growth-oriented type of a monetary policy, which in other words would mean lowering interest rates, which everybody feels is necessary for imparting a momentum to the investments, whether it is domestic or foreign. So that, I think, has to be there, and there has to be better coordination between fiscal policy makers and monetary policy makers, which I feel is likely to happen at this point of time. The second, I think, general point I would like to make is that to give a boost to investment, there are a host of other issues at the policy level, because the investment has completely slowed down. People are shy of making investment because of the heightened public policy risk, heightened regulatory policy risk, heightened political risk, heightened tax policy risk, heightened judicial risks, and so on. So I think that is another area of governance. These issues broadly fall in the domain of governance issues, and I'm sure this government, which is going to put so much of emphasis on good governance, is probably going to reduce some of these risks. So reduction of these risks, coupled with better fiscal monetary policy coordination leading to reduction in interest rates, could perhaps revive the investment momentum and thereby the growth momentum. I want to make one or two points on the energy policy which our other panelists made a short while ago. I think that is power, electricity is one sector which has so many cobwebs at the policy level, where a lot can be done in the short run to improve the electricity situation. The starting point is that you can't have a sector where the total cost of generation of power and availability of power from all sources is say 6-7 rupees, and your distributors are being forced to sell at 2 rupees, 3 rupees. So no system can be viable on that basis. So that has to be fixed. You got an open access system, but the policy cobwebs are so many at the state level and at the central level that is not working. So people who are willing to invest on the generating side are not able to invest because they feel that the distribution companies under political compulsion will not be able to pay them the cost of electricity, and even our electricity regulators at the state level are unable to pass through all the costs to the consumer because of political intervention. So that certainly needs to be fixed. I'll just give you one example. Of course, there are problems in coal linkages for the energy sector, and a lot of generating capacity is held up on that account. But many generating companies are in a position to import coal. But our policy cobweb is such that the cost of imported coal is not allowed to be passed through. So who is going to import coal at a higher price, and if the regulator is not allowing him to pass it through to the consumer, then the generation is again stuck. So I can give you many other examples. I think there are a lot of policy cobwebs in the electricity sector, which I think in a very short term can provide a big impetus to this. Generation can be improved because there is always, a trade-off between availability and cost. Unfortunately today, because of political compulsions, most states, and Gujarat has been an exception, I can certainly say that, are more concerned about the cost of electricity rather than availability. I think that mindset has to change, that you have to pay for whatever it costs, and if people are willing to do that, if state governments and regulators are willing to accept that, I think the electricity sector can be revived, generation capacity can be added. So I think that is one sector which is really crying for reform.
Right.
I have one or two other suggestions.
Okay, we've run out of time, but thank you very much.
Vivek,
I'll keep it for another day, Mr. Vasudev. Completely run out of time. Yes, Kalpana, you want to make a point?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out
We've run out of time totally.
that
Thank you very much, all of you, for... We'll take a quick break. We come back with lots of market voices for you decoding Modi's new cabinet.